things that could be triggering, including, but not limited to, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, trauma. So, take care of yourself in the way that you need to take care of yourself. If this isn't the video for you, that's all well and good. One of my subscribers requested that I make this video, and I thought it would be, a fun video to make, because I was only diagnosed with ADHD because a friend of mine told me their experience, and I was like, oh my god, that sounds like mine. And so yeah, let's get into it. I was diagnosed with ADHD a year and a half ago, in June of 2021. Is that right? That's a year and a half, yeah. And, where do I begin? I had a suspicion that I had ADHD that started around when I was in high school. But promptly got squished at the time because of stereotypes that I had about who has ADHD and what it looks like. I guess stereotypes and kind of misconceptions. And then when I brought it to my parents at the time, they also had those stereotypes and misconceptions. And so, because I was achieving academically, they said you couldn't have ADHD because I was doing well in school. So, I think potentially where the story should begin is where I kind of realized, like, oh, maybe this is something that's going on with me. It was, I think during the pandemic, yeah, it was, and I started hanging out a bunch with two of my very close friends now, but we weren't so close then. And we were talking a lot about going to therapy, and it was my close friend from high school, my close friend from college, and her boyfriend, who coincidentally I went to high school with, and he also went to college with us, but we weren't good friends in high school or college. Like, we became friends after, when they were dating. And it's not super important, but it gives you a picture of who he is. So we were talking about going to therapy, and I would see them probably once or twice a week because they were like in my pod during like heavy COVID days. And so we just hung out with each other, and we started talking about mental health, and he was starting to see this therapist, and this therapist, I remember he brought up at one point that his therapist thought that he might have ADHD, and I said, tell me more about that. And he started talking about his experience, which was very similar to mine. And I started wondering, and then I started seeing the algorithm knew me too well. I started seeing like TikToks and tweets and things on all forms of social media about ADHD in women and girls, and I was suddenly just just remember feeling like it can't be this hard for everyone. Like, and it wasn't defiant or willful, you know. I was always like a pleasure to have in class. It was just the feeling of like, I can't focus, like I can't do this. And I didn't know what it could feel like to just be able to do something, you know, because it was never just doing something. It was always this very protracted process of doing my homework and like getting home and like all of that. It was really, really difficult. And I remember like even on days when I played varsity sports in high school, I was like very involved in things. And I remember it was so weird because like on days when I wouldn't have basketball practice or other practices, like I would be like, oh, I have so much time, I'm gonna like come home and like do my homework and then like hang out. And that was never what it was. I would get home after school and like sit down and do my homework, and I would still work on it until like my bedtime, until like 11 or whenever. Sorry about that. So it was always, and I was always perplexed by that, because like, how was it that I could have, like, I wouldn't have more work on those nights, I would have the same amount of time, but I would just like not do it, and I was always really frustrated by that. And I think that was like kind of where the first inkling of like, this doesn't feel like the experience that other people have, popped into my mind. So, I did really well in school. I applied to college. I got into almost every college that I applied to, and chose the most academically rigorous one because I loved challenges and I loved succeeding. And I thought that I had to, like, if I could go to the most rigorous college, why wouldn't I? And I wanted to go to the school for other reasons too, but that was for sure part of it. It was like an ego thing, a little bit. And when I got to college, I was just, I don't even know how to describe it. I was academically demoralized. And you know, my first quarter of college, like, you know, my parents were like, it's okay, like, people get C's their first quarter, like, it's okay. Mind you, like, I had never gotten below a B plus in high school, and across the board I was getting like C's and D's in college. And then the next semester happened, or the next quarter happened, and I again was getting C's and D's, and the next quarter happened, and I was again getting like C's and D's, and I was demoralized. I became incredibly depressed. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't academically successful. And I had incredible imposter syndrome. I felt like the dumbest person at the school. I felt like the dumbest person on the planet. I really struggled. And that continued through, and I struggled so much I almost didn't go back to school after my freshman year. It was really hard. I felt like I was working so hard, and none of it was showing, like, none of it, no one could see, like, it didn't matter how hard I worked. And I ended up going back to school my sophomore year, even though I had really considered not. And reason that I ended up quitting was because I was incredibly depressed, and also because I wanted to be able to succeed academically. Like, I came to college to go to school, and also to be an athlete, not, not just to play sports. And so I quit the basketball team and my sophomore year, and was like, great, now I'll have all this time to do school. But similarly, we do in high school when I would have days off of basketball practice and still not be able to get anything done. I still struggled incredibly and got pretty bad grades, and just felt like the same imposter syndrome, the same like, why am I here? Like, no one else struggles the way that I am, and they all seem to be able to do it. Like, why can't I do it? And it was incredibly lonely and incredibly disappointing and disheartening and all of that. My mental health was absolutely tanking. So I end my sophomore year like pretty demoralized by school, and then over the summer I go abroad on a field study program that was not connected to the school that I went to, and it was a field program, so we were doing all of this like applied work. So all the things that I had been like struggling to memorize and learn in a classroom or a lab setting, I was suddenly like feeling really facile with in a field setting. Like, I could totally apply all the things that I knew, and suddenly everything was all kind of connecting, I was like, oh, right, like, this makes sense now that I see it in the world. And so it kind of restored my faith in my own intelligence and ability to know things and do things. But again, like, I went back to college, and I, at that point, I felt like I was kind of in the groove, even though it had taken me 2 years. Like, I was not consistently getting C's anymore, but I would like work hard and still get like a B plus, and I would feel like I really excelled in the class, and test taking was a whole thing that just gave me so much anxiety, and like memorization was absolutely not happening for me. And I think back about like a lot of things that I really enjoyed. Like, I loved math when I came to college, and suddenly when I was in college, like, math, because it was so especially the early like series of math was like so memorization heavy, I was like, okay, I'm not good at math, which is not true. I enjoyed it a lot in high school because it was like not so memorization heavy. But then when I was in college, it was so memorization heavy that I stopped taking it because I was like, this is too hard. And similarly with some classes in my major, where I just kind of like checked out because it was all memorization, and a lot of professors would like cold call, which was always like really, when a professor's like, what's the chemical formula for, quartz? Okay, I know the chemical formula for quartz is SiO2, but like, I don't know, rhodopsite, is that a mineral? And then you'd have to like tell them. And in that situation, in any cold call situation, my mind just literally shuts off. Like, there's no thoughts. And I would like not go to class because my professor would cold call. And it was so anxiety producing for me, and I felt like I couldn't advocate for myself because I was like, well, it's not anxiety producing for is and they can just handle it better. Which like makes me really sad to look back on, because I think if I had been diagnosed earlier in my life, I would have been able to advocate for myself better and, you know, tell people this is what is happening for me and not feel like it was just my fault. And not feel like it was just me being stupid or weak or any of those things that I thought about myself during that time. So yeah, but it was in all facets of my life. So then that winter quarter of my junior year, I studied abroad doing studio art, which was a fun thing that I got to do because I love making art. I think I mentioned it recently, but even then, like, I love doing art. Art is something that I can hyperfixate on incredibly, and I still couldn't, like, focus on doing art. Like, I was so distractible. Like, it was wild to me, and thinking back on it, I'm like, right, that is a function of my ADHD, that, like, it wasn't, like, you know, in the moment I kind of thought, like, oh, maybe I just don't like art as much as I thought I did, but I think now I'm like, no, it was just that it was, like, hard for me to do tasks. So anyway, during my junior spring, things kind of hit the fan. I had some of the worst anxiety that I've ever had in my life. And I developed an eating disorder during that time as well. I mean, yeah, I did. I had anxiety, and my anxiety made it really hard for me to eat, and my eating disorder made it so that I didn't take any steps to remedy that. And that spring is like one that is so painful for me to look back on, just in a lot of ways. And it was one of the first times in my life where I had done well in school, which was so fucked and weird, and I still, like, think it is weird and anomalous that, like, my anxiety was so bad that I almost was, like, back in the mentality that I was in high school of, like, not being able to achieve. Double negative. I think it's probably worth noting, too, that in high school, my mom was quite ill, and I was experiencing, like, a great deal of trauma at the time, and a lot of my desire to perform was also informed by a desire to kind of placate everyone around me, and like show everyone that everything was fine, even though it's like aggressively not. And I think when I think back on my junior spring of college, that was also what was happening. And I was academically succeeding, but in every other arena of my life, things were just falling apart. And so I started going to therapy after that summer. I went to an eating disorder clinic and had a therapist. She was great, she was fun, but she was very, like, CBT heavy. And as I've said, I'm not a CBT girly because of the aforementioned ADHD, so it was kind of a weird vibe, but I liked her a lot. And my senior year of college, then I ended up getting 2 traumatic brain injuries / concussions, and that kind of fucked me up generally. So it's hard to say how much of what was happening was like ADHD, how much of what was happening was recovering from a TBI. Yeah, so my senior year doesn't really act as a strong data point, but it was very tumultuous, nevertheless. I graduated, I finished college, by the skin of my teeth, honestly, because I was, like, dealing with 2 TBIs. And, you know, I left college thinking I could never go back to school because I was so bad at it and I felt incredible guilt. I mean, college is so fucking expensive, and I felt as though I had completely wasted, you know, my parents' money, because I just felt like I had failed so much at college. And it was so painful. And again, like, I look back and I know that feeling, and I wish that I had been diagnosed earlier in my life so that I could have, you know, not to say that I wouldn't have struggled, but I don't think that I would have struggled as much. And I don't think that I would leave, you know, higher education feeling like a complete failure. And yeah, and so then after college, I just continued to struggle with what I like to call the Holy Trinity: depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. That it just, I had this moment when I was like 23 where I just kind of thought, like, I thought I would grow out of this, or I thought that there would be a point in my life where I wasn't struggling with one of those 3 things, and it just never came. And that was really painful. You know, even after going to a lot of therapy and, like, processing all of those experiences, processing the trauma of when I was a teenager, processing the trauma of, like, a really fucked up relationship with my body and eating disorders, like, I just kind of thought, like, there would be a time where I got to a place where that didn't exist, which I think now I realize that might kind of be a bit of a pipe dream, because life is not static. You never get to a place and then stay there. But it just felt like I cycled between those 3 things constantly. And it was painful, and it was exhausting. And then I can bring us forward in time to when I had this conversation with my friend's boyfriend, and his experience so closely mirrored mine. And he talked a lot about how he was kind of like a hellion when he was a child. And it started, like, bringing back, you know, I had in my mind that I was kind of, you know, a pleasure to have in class throughout school, which I was. But I started remembering, like, earlier childhood and, like, the immense tantrums that I would have. And I was a menace in preschool. And, like, early elementary, I was kind of a hellion as well. And I started talking to my parents about it. And I finally brought it to my parents, and I said, like, let me just, like, lay this out for you. And I think it's ADHD. And they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, a lot of my experiences. Just learning more and more about, especially for women and girls, the role that this kind of like internalization plays in ADHD, and that it can present as depression, as anxiety, as eating disorders, as, you know, locuses of control, and you know, I think my anxiety was a coping mechanism, you know, because I couldn't forget anything if I was like constantly in fight or flight. And the depression that I experienced my first year of college, I think, was like a direct reflection of the sudden realization that it was really hard for me, and I didn't have any skills to like figure out how to do school better. And so I made an appointment with a psychiatrist, which, as most healthcare and mental health care especially is, as is the case with most mental health care, it took like 3 months to get an appointment. And so I did, and it was so stressful though, because it was a video appointment, because it was during COVID times, and no one had told me that I had to be in state for the appointment, and so I was in California, and he didn't even ask me if I was, but I told him that I was, because I had like gotten stranded in California on a road trip. And so I told him that, and then he was like, I'm sorry, like I can't do the appointment because you're not in state. And I was like, I literally had a breakdown. I was like sobbing and just kind of a mess. I just felt like this thing that I had wanted was like so long coming, and then I totally squandered it by this thing that I didn't know, which just felt like shit. And so I had to like reschedule the appointment, and it was again like another month until I could have that appointment. It was the worst. And then the psychiatrist that I saw kind of sucked, honestly. I told him that I had anxiety, and he was like, what do you get anxious about? And I was like, everything. And then I was like, well, it's like more of a feeling in my body than like an active, like I'm anxious about this thing. And he was like, you're like really insightful about like how you know yourself. And I was like, okay. And it was also complicated because I had this history of depression and eating disorders and anxiety that had never been documented in my healthcare, like in my records, because all the treatment I'd received for it had been outside of that, or like had not really, you know, I'd not really received treatment for it. And so it was a really, it's so hard to go and advocate for yourself and say, this is something that I experienced. And then, you know, especially for them to then say, well, that isn't in your chart, that isn't in your records. And to be like, I know, but it's still, like, do you want me to tell you about it? Like, so, yeah, so I kind of gave him the rundown. He was really concerned about me taking Adderall with my history of brain injuries, which was interesting. And I don't know, he wasn't my favorite provider. is like written for children, potentially. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. It was just weird, and like, even when I gave it to my parents, they were like, I don't understand this question. I was like, me neither, because like sometimes I'm like squirming and fidgeting in my seat and like can't sit still, but other times that's not true. And like, you know, how do you answer for like sometimes in some situations but not in others? So pretty convoluted and tricky, but I was really glad to like have their support in doing it and in getting the care that I needed. And yeah, so he started me on 20 milligrams of Adderall. No, 10 milligrams of Adderall a day. And it was the instant release Adderall, and I was taking it twice a day, which was horrible. It was just terrible. Because it was like this during the day. It was like going up and then going down, going up and going down. Because instant release Adderall is like, you really feel it. Even when I take it now, which I don't take it very often, but like, you can just like you feel yourself coming up. Like, it is intense. But I was like really glad to be diagnosed, really glad to be like trying a medication route for taking care of it, and excited to just like see what that did, and how I felt, and yeah, so that route was of taking the Adderall twice a day sucked, and I didn't like it, and he told me I didn't have to take it all the time, and so I was just gonna like, okay, I'll take it when I need it, but I didn't really know when I needed it, and I would come down off of it really hard too, like, that at the end of the day, I was just fucking exhausted, so it was not the vibe, I would say. And one of my parents' friends got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and she suggested this like ADHD center where like all they do is like ADHD diagnosis and medication management and therapy and coaching and stuff for kids and adults. So I made an appointment there, and you know, told them that I already had a diagnosis, and told them kind of about my experience, and the evaluation they did was much more like understandable as an adult. But that being said, these appointments also were like, for my insurance, I had to get them like reimbursed, so it was definitely like a access and privilege thing. Like, I feel disappointed that the care that I received within like the healthcare system was kind of shitty, and that like the only way that I could get the care that I needed was through like private care. So just so you know. But they so I told them like all about my experience and the psychiatrist that I saw that wasn't great, and they set me up with a psychiatrist and a therapist, and I started seeing therapist, and now I've seen her for like a year and a half, and I started seeing the psychiatrist who like kind of talked me through. She was just like was much more explicit about so many things. Like, I feel like the psychiatrist that I saw through my healthcare provider was like, okay, just like try Adderall, we'll see. And I was like, is there anything, like, I had to ask him about like side effects or like things like that, or like how I should take it or when I should, you know, all of those things. And he was like reluctant to give me that information. And this psychiatrist I saw was like literally walked me through all of the options of like medication management that I could do, also fucks with your appetite. I also got some headaches, but once I had taken it for long enough, like, she was just so, she's great, I love her, but she just, like, also told me, like, you can not take your Adderall for a day and it'll be fine, but, like, you have ADHD every day, and, like, even though you aren't going to work every day or aren't, like, doing things that you need executive functioning for every day, like, ADHD doesn't just affect your productivity or, you know, your ability to complete tasks. Like, ADHD is also, like, really fucks with your emotional regulation, which, like, I don't even think I talked about so far, but, like, I think as a child especially, like, I had really big tantrums or really big emotional outbursts, and I've always been, like, a really emotional person, but yeah, sometimes I would feel like I couldn't, like, regulate my emotions, and, like, ADHD, Adderall helps with that. So anyway, yada yada yada. Now I take 20 milligrams of extended release Adderall pretty much every day, and it really has changed my life in a lot of ways. You know, obviously while I'm not in school, it's just made it so much easier for me to do tasks and to take care of the things in my life. And I've realized now, after taking Adderall for a year pretty much, I was worried that my anxiety would get worse because Adderall is a stimulant medication. If you have anxiety, it can make that worse. But I kind of realized that so much of my anxiety was because of my ADHD. Like, because I couldn't remember things and plan for things and understand how long things took and all of that. Like, that made my anxiety worse, and it interestingly also made my social anxiety worse. And now, after being on Adderall for about a year, I definitely, there are moments where I have really bad anxiety, like, especially cyclically, but on the whole, I have so much less anxiety than I used to, and I think I had a moment in the late summer where I was like, I don't know if I've ever felt this, like, emotionally regulated before. Like, just, even though, like, shit was totally hitting the fan, I just felt okay. And that was a really remarkable feeling, in the moment. But, yeah, it has really, really changed my life, in a lot of ways. And, you know, it makes me feel so more confident in my ability to try things that I thought I could never do, like, academically now, you know, like, now I, like, consider going back to school with some more reality than I used to. You know, I'm not so afraid of the failure that I experienced. Yeah, so that's my story. I'm sure that I missed bits and bobs. If you have any questions,